Hello, seniors. Welcome to another online lecture. This one is much more of a kind of how-to as a reference video for how to do a process bibliography. I strongly encourage you to be taking notes as we go along so that you can look back on this process as you are working on your own process bibliography and even next year so that you have notes on how to keep yourself organized while doing research. So, things that I'll run through in this lecture is what on earth is a process bibliography? Why should you do a process bibliography? Expectations that we have for this research paper around process bibliographies, and then I'll quickly walk through an example, a made-up example of a process bibliography. So, what is it? As I always like to do, why don't we break down what the word actually means? So, take away our adjective of process for the moment. Forget that for a moment. So bibliography, what is that? A bibliography literally means the studying of books. Kind of like geography is the study of land. But anyway, study of books. It's come to basically mean in the academic world as it's a record of books related to a topic. So at the end of a paper, you list your bibliography. So that's a list of the books that are related to the topic that you just wrote about. Or at the end of a book, somebody might give you a bibliography of continued reading. For us, we're adding in the process word. And we'll be using it as a way to stay organized while reading numerous sources. So it's a record-keeping device for you. You're not necessarily going to share this with the reader of your research paper, but you need it as someone who's going through an academic exercise to keep yourself organized, to keep track of all the various things you're reading. Right? So, in short, I'll get into more detail in a second, but a process bibliography is the basic information about a source. So if somebody else wanted to look it up, or if you need to go find that source again, what's the basic information about the source? What are the basic contents of that source that relate to your thesis? And then an actual statement, a note to yourself about how it relates to your initial thesis. So that initial thesis we spent the past 2 days working on, how does this thing you just read relate to it? The answer might be it doesn't. I now realize that my initial thesis is more this than this, or this is actually going to be a great piece of my argument when I'm writing my paper. So why a process bibliography? So researching is a journey. Okay, you're exploring a topic. You're wandering around, not completely, but you have a general goal of where you're trying to get, but you don't know exactly how you're going to get there. You're, to use the word again, wandering through different knowledge. All right? Your goal still, however, is to come to a thesis, to come to a salient, clear point that you can then back up with facts. And you're picking up these facts as you're wandering through reading extra information. So the process bibliography is, we're asking you to do this to keep track of your thoughts. All right, it'll pay off when you're going to your drafting. Wait, what was that thing I read? Oh, I made a note for it. It's right here. Or I thought this thing wasn't helpful. I noted that it wasn't helpful here, but now looking back at where I'm actually going to go with my thesis, I might want to come back to this document. Okay, or even when you think I found one book and it didn't really work that well, I know that, okay, books that have this topic are not helpful to me. I should not go back to a book similar to this because I've already done that. That's not helpful to me. So an interesting analogy is, if you think at that, look down to this picture. It's kind of like a detective's board in a crime drama, right? You've got lots and lots of different pieces here, here, here. Each one of these is your little sources, little clues. When you're writing, when you're drafting, you're connecting all these dots to your thesis, over to your thesis, trying to find the web of what it all leads to. The process bibliography is your board to keep track of all of that stuff. So, expectations. Your process bib is typed. At least the final version that you turn into us is typed. So if you have a computer and you want to bring it to the library with you, you're more than welcome to. They have free Wi-Fi. But you should take notes and it should be typed. Yes, if you write it by hand, you'll have to retype it, but the retyping exercise will help you think about all the stuff you've read. And again, will help you when you're drafting your actual paper. So the pieces of an entry, there are 3 pieces. First, you need to have the citation information, which is the title of the thing. So it's the title of the book, the title of the academic journal you got it out of, the title of the newspaper and the article. But citation information, who wrote it, the location, year, and company of publication, so that you can track down. Sometimes there's books of multiple names, and if you know the publishing information about it, you can find that exact book again. And then, of course, the actual page numbers it was on. Citation information is so that you can find your way back to it, and then in text citations in your final paper, that is so that someone else, if they want to continue research, can look back to where you were referencing. Second thing that you need to have is a summary of information that was found. So main idea, key points, mainly sticking to the key points and main ideas as they relate to your initial thesis. Also, you probably want to note key facts and figures, or if there's one quote, you're like, oh, I want to use this quote in my paper, write it down, right? This way you don't necessarily need to come back to the book. So those of you that are having more data-heavy theses, write down the facts, write down the figures, photocopy the graph if you need to. Right? And finally, you need to have a statement at the end of each one about the usefulness to your research. This is useful to me because, and finish the sentence at the end of the entry, or this will not be useful to my research because, and be able to explain it, be able to articulate it to yourself, and then obviously to us, your teachers that will be grading your process bibliography, proving that you're thinking through it and you're not just cherry picking the best resources, but you're actually wandering and exploring your topic. Continuing the expectations. Your process bibliography, along with being typed and having those 3 pieces to it, must have at least 10 entries. You need to prove to us that you have thought through, examined, and attempted to synthesize at least 10 different sources, so you should have 10 different entries. 5 of those sources, 5 of those entries in your process bibliography must be physical books or published academic journals. They can't be websites, okay? They need to be actual books that you have picked up. So something written by an author, and that author was writing about something important enough and legitimate enough that a publishing company gave them a book deal, right? We need to have substantial, legitimate sources, right? And I know many of you are wondering, well, how many sources do I actually need in my final paper? You need as many sources as going to lead you to a quality proving of your thesis. But the basic expectation is that you need at least 6, let's get the right tool, 6 sources are cited in your final paper, 3 of which must be books. Okay? There's your note for those of you that want to make sure that you're doing just the minimum. I encourage you to do more. The more things you read, the more entries you make, the better time you'll have writing your thesis and the evidence to back it up. So, an example. So an initial thesis that is related to, I think 1 or 2 of you are interested in this, but initial thesis. An important aspect of the vice president's position is his limited legal importance to the country. Somebody's writing about how the vice president really isn't that important to us, and is going to prove to the fact that there's no actual super legal importance to the functioning of the country. So, some resources. Sorry, that is turned the wrong way, but if you need to turn your screen, feel free to do so. So, there's a book. I happen to have this book sitting on my bookshelf, but a book that you found using the catalog at the library, the online catalog. You knew, you were smart, and thought, all right, the vice presidency is pretty specific, so I'm going to go one step larger. Let's get out some books on the presidency, pull some books on the presidency, see if they have some information in them about the vice president. And so this one, here's your basic information. Everything on this page, except for the year of publication, which is on the next page. But all of this is the stuff that you will use for your citation information on your source. So that's just inside the front cover. The next important page to you is the table of contents. Here are 2 pictures of the table of contents. Right? You can see that up in chapter 2, all right, creating the presidency, there are a few pages about the vice presidency. So maybe that page 54 to 56 would be useful to you. And then look towards the end of the book, after we've talked about all the presidents, there's an entire chapter devoted to the vice presidency. Probably want to investigate both of those. For right now, just to keep the online lecture short, we're just going to focus on these 6 pages here. Sorry, 2 pages. If this is blurry to you, it is okay. It's just an example of you're going to open up to a page in your in the book. Okay, it's going to probably be a dense book. You're going to skim it, figure out what is useful to you. So this is a bit of a history lesson. We kind of see in these first 2 paragraphs, I'll read it aloud, the idea of an office like the vice president was not unknown among the delegates to the Constitutional Convention. Interesting. Okay, so they'd heard of vice presidents before. During the period of British rule, several colonies had lieutenant governors, sometimes known as deputy governors, or by another title, whose ongoing duties were minor but who stood by to serve as acting governor if the governor died, was moved for office, was ill, yada, yada, yada. Okay? And then it says 5 states included lieutenant governors in their constitutions once the United States declared itself free from Britain. All right, that's interesting. So they were familiar with, the colonists, the framers were familiar with the concept of having a backup executive to run the government should something happen to the person they elected. So they were familiar with that idea. All right, reading along, let's see. Succession, Senate President. All right, I knew about that already. All right, on to the next page about kind of the history of the vice presidency. So skipping along, all right, they're talking about James Madison, and he took really good notes of the Constitutional Convention, so we know what happened. All right, let's see if there's anything that pertains exactly to us. Let's see here. All right, in this next paragraph here, let's see what it says. Other evidence from the records of the convention suggests that most of the delegates intended that the president's successor serve merely as acting president and only until a special election could be called. So it sounds like a pretty darn good quote for me. I might actually want to write down that full quote. They didn't actually want the vice president to ever become president. He was just there just in case and to hold the office until a new president could be elected. That proves that they really did not see the vice president as important. That relates directly to my thesis. Oh my goodness. All right, I'm going to write this down. So, here we go. Here is my make-believe entry in my process bibliography. I have my part 1, okay? Part 1, I have my basic citation information, all this so that I or someone else could go back and find this exact book. We got the title, the authors, the publishing company, the publisher and location, the year, and then the page numbers that I actually used. Again, there's a whole nother chapter, but to keep things short for you, we just pretended that we were focusing on these pages. So, the summary that I noted for myself, that first page that I just wrote down a quick note. Many colonies and new states had positions similar to the vice president. Framers were familiar with the idea of a backup executive. All right, they might fit in somewhere in my paper, maybe in the introduction, or it might just be a good transition sentence or something. But good to know. This way I can cite it and make sure I give authors credit because I didn't discover that on my own, so I need to give someone credit. Other thing that I got really excited about. So according to Madison's notes, the framers' original intentions were not for a vice president to ever become president. Only supposed to be acting president until a new one was chosen. All right, that's important. I'm probably going to build a evidence paragraph, a supporting paragraph out of that last note. Might even want to put in the exact quotation from the book. Then finally, we need our third piece, which is important for us to see, us being your teachers, to see that you're thinking through and analyze sources. Okay, this source is related to my thesis because it discusses the framer's intention for the vice presidency. Sorry, that got cut off a little bit. Right, so a little note: if it ended up not fitting with it, you would still need the usefulness piece, and we still want you to have noted what was in it, because you might come back to it and realize after reading a few other sources, this actually is useful to me, and you can amend your usefulness statement. Alrighty, so I will see you at the library. Quick fun note, fun fact, that at the top of the Harold Washington Library, this is a picture that I took, there's these big fancy aluminum things. Well, each one of those is an owl. An owl is the Greek symbol for knowledge. So, when you're walking into the library, know that there's big owls watching over you as you gain some knowledge. I will see you at the library.